License to spill. The chaotic files of Agent Penny P. She's MI515, and no one is safe. Not even herself. Part 1. Stirred, not sorted. Where Penny's peaceful incompetence is rudely interrupted by the fate of the nation. Chapter 1. Meet Penny Pym. There were only 3 things Penny Pym feared in this world: surveillance-grade staplers, unsolicited group hugs, and being called into HQ for a chat. The third was happening right now. MI5's West Wing, not to be confused with the West Wing, which Penny maintained was better staffed, smelled faintly of betrayal and printer toner. Somewhere between the corridor of denied expense claims and the Department of Beverage Security, yes, they monitored tea breaks, Penny was trying not to sweat through her entirely polyester blazer. Her heels clicked with the conviction of someone pretending to know where she was going. The clicking stopped abruptly when she ran into the door. It was glass, and very clean. A passing intern made the kind of sound that tried not to be a laugh. Penny gave him a look she hoped translated to, "I know 16 ways to kill you with this lanyard." She entered the room. Inside, Nigel Thistlewhack, head of tactical administration and unintentional sabotage, his words, sat behind a desk, piled with unopened reports, a bonsai tree, and what looked suspiciously like a half-eaten burrito. "Agent Pym," Nigel said, as if her name hurt his tongue. "Nigel," Penny replied brightly, as if they were old friends. They weren't. "You've been selected," he said, in the same tone one might use to inform a colleague they've tested positive for something contagious and incurable. Penny blinked. "Selected? For reassignment." That word again. Reassignment was MI5 code for being moved somewhere unpleasant, like the surveillance van parking unit or Scotland. Last time she was reassigned, she'd ended up cataloguing chewing gum DNA from under parliamentary benches. The government had no idea what MPs were chewing. "To what division?" she asked cautiously. Nigel cleared his throat and tapped his screen. "The new Department of Archival Beverage Logistics." Penny stared. "I'm sorry. Is that a real department, or did Monty finally get access to the label maker?" "You'll be overseeing alphabetization of caffeinated and decaffeinated asset logs by roast profile." She blinked again. "So, you've assigned me to file coffee?" Nigel nodded, relieved she understood. "You start tomorrow. Try not to explode anything." Penny was about to reply with something that would almost certainly get her demoted to agent in charge of toilet paper rotation, but her phone buzzed. "Monty, P45, meet me in the sub-basement, urgent." Which was unusual. Monty rarely texted. He preferred to deliver his messages through passive-aggressive gadget tutorials. She stood. "Actually, I've just remembered. I'm late for my annual tactical debrief with Dr. Spreadsheet." Nigel looked suspicious but shrugged. "Fine. Don't be late for beverage duty." Penny left without another word, swiping a complimentary biscuit on the way out. Chocolate hobnob. Her favourite. One small victory. The sub-basement of MI5 was where forgotten departments went to die, or in Monty's case, to tinker. Officially, he was head of applied surveillance technology and experimental gadgets, which mostly meant he had a license to glue things together until they exploded and blame budget cuts. She found him crouched under a desk, wrestling with a device that looked like a stapler had made love to a toaster. "Penny!" he beamed, emerging with grease in his hair and a bandage already on his cheek. "Good, you're here. Hold this." She took the gadget reluctantly. "Is this going to detonate?" "Only if you sneeze near it, or swear in Italian." She held it very still. "I need you to see this," he said, wiping his hands and pulling up a holographic file. "Someone tried to erase it, but I recovered the log." Penny squinted. The projection flickered. Classified. Redacted. Confidential. The usual MI5 foreplay. "Go to the last entry," he said. She did. Her stomach dropped. A grainy photo. A man's face. Her old partner, Declan. Declared KIA in Berlin 3 years ago. And yet here he was, older, wearier, alive. The timestamp was yesterday. And the location, Pret-a-Manger, Westminster. "Is this real?" she asked. Monty nodded grimly. "He used your old call sign, codename Umbra. That file pinged an old protocol. It's linked to Project Earl Grey." "The T-weapon?" He gestured vaguely. "We don't talk about it anymore, since the incident." "Ah yes, the Earl Grey fiasco. 3 unconscious diplomats, 1 narcoleptic ambassador, and a weaponized scone." Penny stared at Declan's face. Her heart was trying to outrun her brain. She should walk away. Let it go. She had a desk job now, a badge that opened coffee cupboards. But instead, she said, Get me reinstated? Monty looked surprised. I thought they revoked your license after the Buckingham bidet incident. They did. She smiled grimly. But I kept the uniform and the key to locker 17. His eyes widened. The exploding cufflink. And the interrogation lipstick. Monty grinned. I'll draw up the paperwork. Penny exhaled. Her hands were already shaking. Not with fear, but anticipation. Declan was alive. Someone had lied. And if Project Earl Grey was back in play, it meant this wasn't just personal. It was national. As she walked back toward the elevators, Penny passed a mirror. She stopped. Looked herself in the eye. They said I was a footnote, she whispered. Then smirked. Let's see who's reading now. She stepped into the lift. Next stop, chaos. And she was bringing the bendy straw. Chapter 2. The Filing Cabinet of Doom. The Department of Archival Beverage Logistics was, in spirit and temperature, only slightly warmer than the bottom of the North Sea. It smelled of damp cardboard, over-ambition, and peppermint tea from 1997. Penny Pym had been here for 4 hours, and already she had paper cuts in places MI5 didn't train you to treat. Alphabetical by caffeine intensity, the orientation manual had said cheerily. She wasn't sure what sociopath had decided to grade coffee files by milligrams per ounce instead of, say, name or date, but she hoped they were somewhere distant, retired, and locked inside their own filing system. Penny crouched by the last cabinet in row Z. Yes, there was a row Z, and braced herself to open the final drawer. The cabinet rattled like it had a grudge. A tiny spider scurried out and gave her a look of disappointment. Don't judge me, Jeff, she muttered at it. At least I'm not living behind Earl Grey. She yanked open the drawer, and the folder sprang out with such force that it smacked her in the chin. Standard MI5 greeting. Penny blinked, caught the offending file and rubbed her face. Right, let's see what you're hiding. The label on the folder read, Lux Lucat, Diplomatic Tea Exchange Program, High Sensitivity. She raised an eyebrow. Diplomatic tea exchange. That was a thing? Inside was a single sheet of paper, badly faxed and even more badly redacted. She read the top line, then read it again. Request for immediate deployment of experimental blend number 47, Insomniac's Kiss, to Embassy of Luxembourg, in retaliation for mint infusion slander. Penny froze. Now, MI5 protocol was famously vague on many things, like when to engage hostiles and whether office parties counted as internal morale operations. But one thing it was very clear about. Experimental blend number 47 was not to be used without cabinet-level approval. As in actual government cabinet, not filing. Why? Because experimental blend number 47 was 96% caffeine and 4% whatever made hummingbirds aggressive. The last time it was brewed, 3 junior analysts hadn't blinked for 19 hours. One began speaking fluent ancient Sumerian. Another attempted to climb Big Ben wearing nothing but a post-it marked for Queen and Country. Penny stared at the memo. It had been stamped approved in red ink, and underneath, signed PP her initials. Oh, buggering hell. This wasn't just bureaucratic chaos. This was framed by paperwork-level chaos. She flipped the sheet. Scribbled on the back, in looping handwriting that looked suspiciously like Lady Beryl's calligraphy pen, were the words, "Send by Friday. Let them steep in it." Penny exhaled slowly, dragging her fingers through her hair. This wasn't just a misfiled document. It was an act of beverage-based war. And if Luxembourg got hold of that blend without knowing how to neutralize it, typically with a biscuit of equal caloric density, their ambassador might develop what Monty once described as acute chronoreactive tremors. Or as Penny put it, a jazz band in the bloodstream. She checked the time. 14:32. The internal mail collection was at 1500. If that folder went up in the dumbwaiter to distribution, it would reach the diplomatic pouch team by tea time. And after that, International Incident O'Clock. She had exactly 28 minutes to stop a caffeinated apocalypse. And naturally, no clearance, no access card, and no functioning phone signal. Because MI5 sublevels were built like Cold War bunkers wrapped in tinfoil. Okay, she muttered. Think, Penny. She glanced around the archives. No one. Just her, the spider, and several million gallons of improperly classified nonsense. Plan A, set the folder on fire. Immediate. Satisfying. But the last time she set fire to a file, it activated the chemical suppression foam, and she'd ended up tasting vaguely of mint and regret for a week. Plan B, take the folder to Nigel. Confess. Get yelled at. Possibly demoted to something involving pigeons. Plan C, do what she did best. Something very stupid. She stuffed the folder into her bag and sprinted toward the service lift. 3 minutes later, Penny burst into the distribution centre like a caffeine-fueled tornado in ballet flats. "Oi!" shouted the male clerk, whose badge read Clive. "You can't be in here!" "I'm from Internal Courier Resolution," Penny lied. "That's not a department." "It is now. We're very hush-hush. Started Tuesday." Clive narrowed his eyes. "What do you want?" Penny smiled sweetly and pulled a small cube from her pocket. "Have you seen this?" Clive leaned in. The cube clicked. A puff of glitter exploded in his face. "Sleep well, Clive," she whispered as he slumped to the floor muttering about unicorns. Monty's glitter knockout device worked a treat, even if it did leave people mildly allergic to birthday parties afterward. She grabbed the outgoing pouch marked Luxembourg and replaced its contents with a packet of PG tips and a handwritten note. "Sorry, tea delayed, blame Brexit. Love, the Queen." She resealed the pouch, set the real file on fire with Monty's controlled burn pen, tossed the ashes into the bin marked Shredded Trust, and walked out as casually as possible. Back at her desk, Penny sat down and tried to breathe. One minor diplomatic disaster averted. A regular Tuesday. She stared at the blinking cursor on her screen. Her inbox had grown another 47 unread messages. One was from Nigel. Subject line, T-filing error. She ignored it. Instead, she opened a private draft and typed, Project Earl Grey, Phase 2, Declan missing. Cited yesterday, files being erased. Watch for the smile. She saved it under the title, Lunch Order, Urgent. Then she swiveled in her chair, opened a drawer, and pulled out the exploding cufflink. File this, she muttered, and smiled to no one. Chapter 3, MI51. There were many things Penny Pym didn't know. The location of her birth certificate. What Monty actually did with his weekends. Why MI5 still used fax machines. But the one thing she thought she did know, down to her socks and soul, was this. She was not a field agent. Not anymore. She'd signed the forms. The debrief had been filled out in triplicate. There had been a ceremonial shredding of her old ID badge, accidentally fed into the paper laminator, resulting in the world's most indestructible resignation letter. They'd even revoked her license to make official decisions in the cafeteria queue. Which is why, on a rainy Wednesday morning, when Penny walked into HQ carrying 2 sopping folders and a thermos of government-issued decaf, she did not expect to be saluted. "Agent Pym," said the guard at the checkpoint. She blinked. "I'm sorry, are you talking to me or doing improv?" "Ma'am," he said, standing to attention. "You've been cleared for sub-level access. Security reflagged your credentials this morning." She frowned. "No, it didn't. I'm just here to file decaffeinated diplomatic memos and avoid eye contact with Nigel." He glanced at his tablet. P45 clearance reinstated. Field operative, Tier 2. Penny froze. The air around her suddenly felt too crisp, like the world had pulled itself taut. "Are you sure?" she asked slowly. "Because the last time they gave me clearance by mistake, I ended up at a NATO summit disguised as an eco-clown." The guard hesitated. "All I know is you're greenlit and the elevators will now respond to your retinal scan again. Please don't try to blink in Morse code." She did anyway, just in case. Then she stepped back from the checkpoint, pulled out her old badge, now bent at one corner from use as an emergency cheese slicer, and stared at it. Pym Penny, agent classification revoked. But in faint, glitching red pixels, new words had appeared beneath it. Reinstated. P45. Provisional status. "Monty," she muttered. "You absolute ferret." Monty's lab was, as usual, on fire. Not metaphorically. Literally. "Sorry," he yelled as she burst through the smoke. Experiment 9 went full souffle. "You reinstated me," Penny accused, waving the badge like a Victorian woman brandishing a glove. He looked up, blinking through soot and excitement. "I did, technically. Sort of." "Sort of?" He held up a form. "There's a clause in the Bureau protocol that allows for temporary reinstatement if an inactive agent is caught in proximity to a pending security breach. Like, say, a diplomatic coffee war." "That wasn't my fault." "Exactly. Which is why I listed you as Hero of the Luxembourg Prevention Protocol." "That's not a real thing." "It is now. I filed it under contingency nonsense. Grade 3. Nigel signed it off last night. He thought it was a receipt for printer ink." Penny stared at him. "You got me reinstated by submitting fake paperwork under a fake initiative caused by a file I found by accident." Monty grinned. "You're welcome." The next few hours were strange. Penny wandered through HQ like a ghost who'd been invited back for a second haunting. Doors opened for her. Staff nodded. One intern actually offered her a latte. At her old locker, no, 17, the one she'd last used to hide a listening device inside a Scotch egg. She paused. The keypad blinked green. It still recognized her handprint. Inside, the exploding cufflink, the interrogation lipstick, the grappling tights, and a handwritten note from herself. If you're reading this, either things have gone terribly wrong, or you're bored again. Either way, don't trust the man with the umbrella. Love. Me. She pocketed the cufflink, applied the lipstick because one never knew, and whispered, God, I've missed you. That afternoon, Penny wandered back upstairs to find her inbox had changed. It was no longer labelled T-Logistics, non-essential. It now read PIM P as Field Assets Active. She clicked it open. There was one message flagged urgent, redacted level 4. She hesitated, then opened it. Target confirmed. Sighting, Declan. Project Earl Grey, motion reopened. Location, Pret a Manger, Whitehall. Code word, Fluffenstein. Trust no one. Mission, observe. Do not engage. My 5-1 have initiative, she frowned. MI5-1. That wasn't a department. That wasn't anything. She clicked the embedded link. It rerouted to an intranet page with no title, no header. Just a single sentence. You were never out. You were just the distraction. Her blood went cold. Somewhere in the building, she was being watched. Somewhere behind the jokes and desk duty and glitter traps, something real was unfolding. And she'd just walked into it, uninvited, unarmed, and completely ignored. She sat very still. Then she whispered to the empty room. I don't remember signing up for espionage theatre. Behind her, the light on the office printer blinked. It printed one page. She stood and read it. Target moving. Westminster. Tonight. Bring the corkscrew. She folded the paper and slid it into her coat. Something told her this wasn't about wine.